we believe that virtual fencing will allow producers, no matter where you are on the globe, to more efficiently utilize the grass that you currently have. The output of that would be greater stocking densities, being able to produce more pounds of beef per acre. But also at the same time, it allows you to gain access and potentially utilize land that historically maybe you weren't able to. If you take the Western United States as an example, there's a lot of big open rangeland that it's just impractical to be able to fence that with conventional 4 or 5 strand barbed wire. And so as a result, that land just goes underutilized. Well, virtual fencing will change that. Virtual fencing will now allow you to, as a rancher or as a cattle producer, to access and unlock grazing lands and to use them more efficiently. So we believe that as we look to the future, just land availability is going to be an issue, and virtual fencing will help solve that. Secondarily to that, we know that all over rural America, labor is becoming more and more of an issue. And at the same time, as we have less and less land available for cattle production, we also have the need to be more intensive in our efforts with fewer labor options. And so we think virtual fencing will also help on that side as well. Whether that is just the cost of rolling and unrolling fence, whether that's the time and effort need to maintain a permanent fence, that is to us another opportunity for the use of virtual fencing. Gathering times. We already have a lot of evidence from folks that utilize the virtual fencing as a way to sort of automatically gather cattle. They can push those lines and bring those cattle into whatever trap that they want to bring them to. It takes less labor to do that, and at the same time, because each collar has a GPS monitor, they're able to actually see where every cow is on the place. And so even if they do have cattle that may not get caught up in the gathering, they know exactly where to send folks. So the time saving is tremendous.
Now, you mentioned a lot of great benefits there in that first response. I mean, you talked about better utilizing the land, increasing stocking density, that labor savings and saving time there. But from your perspective and what you are seeing with ranchers who adopt this technology, what is the main draw for people who are adopting virtual fence?
The draw to virtual fencing with ranchers is very individualistic depending on what the ranch goals are. The common draw is production efficiency. But the question really comes down to, what does production efficiency mean for that specific ranch? And that could be increased stocking density. That could be exclusion from sensitive areas that allow you to access conservation payments. That could also be the ability to rotate and rest pastures. One of the uses that we find more and more across the western U.S. is the use of virtual fencing to manage the fuel loads on pastures, especially during high-risk times during fire. And then we also see a lot of wildlife and conservation around it. Virtual fencing becomes a really good tool to keep cattle out of sensitive nesting areas during the right times. And at the same time, if that rancher is utilizing things like prescribed burning, the ability to really control the level at which the grass is when you burn really gives that rancher a tool to manage that land very efficiently. The other area is one we talked about earlier, and that is sort of how you divide up your labor. If you can utilize virtual fencing to reduce some of the more mundane challenges and jobs on the ranch and move those hands to higher value activities, then that also benefits the ranch.
Well, one thing that comes to mind for me, I don't know the exact number or even a ballpark statistic on how many grazable lands that are actually rented per se instead of owned acres, but I think anytime that you can better utilize that input cost, I mean, even if you own it, it's an input too, but I just think about even some of our own rented pastures and how we don't really want to put in all the inputs and work to cross fence them necessarily, because you have to work with the landlord obviously on that. But if you have virtual fence and that opportunity, that opens up a lot of doors to better utilize that resource.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the primary areas that we see, and not just rental of private property to manage your cattle, but we're starting to see just from the government perspective the opportunity to open more rangeland to folks on Forest Service properties or BLM properties is increasing dramatically, because now there is a tool to be able to manage those pastures and manage the boundaries and manage the cattle through these public lands as well.
Do you see, or is anything in the works with like something similar to like the equip program where this technology could be made available through that because there is the conservation piece tied to it, or that's a major benefit?
Yeah, so actually at the federal level, the NRCS has already enabled the states to utilize virtual fencing under both EQIP and through the conservation payments. So interestingly, just because the federal government has made it available and funded it, doesn't necessarily mean at the state level it's been implemented. So what we would recommend is if whatever state you're in, if you're interested, the way to get more funding for these EQIP programs for virtual fencing is to reach out to your local conservation folks, to reach out to your NRCS range con and ask about it. And what I would say is today we've probably got a half a dozen states just in the last 6 months who've really upped the amount of monies they're dedicating toward virtual fencing through EQIP. And it's simply because of the demand from the people in the local conservation districts.
Folks, if you want the full scoop on virtual fence and this conversation, be sure to listen to the full podcast episode on casual cattle conversations. You can find that on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and frankly, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. With that, happy ranching, folks.